My name is Maxwell Hubbard, and my thesis research addresses work on planetary protection and its need for updating in the new space age. In an effort to make my thesis more compelling and accessible around the world, I decided to create a website that shared my research while providing fun and interactive games and simulations. My main goal was to simulate the types of things that you might find in a museum exhibit. Behind me, you can see the landing page of my website. I have divided it into 4 sections. What is planetary protection? Previous protection efforts, should we be concerned, and the future of planetary protection. I will be going through each part, beginning with what is planetary protection. Each page begins with a quote that I believe captures the intentions of each section. My intention for this section is to show why planetary protection is needed, by emphasizing that life is able to exist outside of Earth's protections. To begin this, I start by explaining what planetary protection is. Planetary protection addresses microbial contamination of the solar system by spacecraft that we launch from Earth, as well as extraterrestrial contamination of Earth and Moon. Protecting celestial bodies, such as Mars and other planets, is known as forward contamination. We want to make sure that our rockets and instruments that we bring to outer space are clean. This way, if microbial life exists on other planets, we don't bring bacteria from Earth that could potentially kill it before we even discover it. We also want to make sure that if we find life elsewhere, it isn't life that we brought there ourselves. Backward contamination has to do with outer space objects coming back to Earth. For example, this could be rocks from the Moon or Mars, as well as any scientific instrument that we have sent from Earth that has touched down on another celestial body. In order to express the need for why planetary protection is needed, I address the question, can Earth life exist in outer space? Through a comprehensive look at studies conducted on the International Space Station, as well as in low Earth orbit over the last 20 years about microbial survival in outer space conditions, I created and coded a simulation to visualize this data and show the differences between certain microorganisms' survival in outer space versus on Earth. In order to bolster further research and help achieve my goal of a museum-type feel, I created a prediction algorithm that uses trends in the data to predict future values. The parameters to this algorithm can be changed in the advanced section of the simulation. Changing the parameters can cause different results to occur, leaving the user the ability to create their own experiments and conclusions. I encourage everyone to experiment with this simulation, as I wish to educate and engage people on the topic of planetary protection. The next section has to do with humanity's past efforts with planetary protection. Planetary protection began at the dawn of the space race in the late 1950s. Out of fear that countries would compromise existing ecosystems in our solar system in order to win the space race, the National Academy of Sciences called for a creation of methods to decontaminate spacecraft. Just days after the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, was established, the Committee on Space Research, or COSPAR, was created to manage a code of conduct in regard to planetary protection. The Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, or otherwise known as the Outer Space Treaty, was signed in 1967 and has since been signed or ratified by every country who participates in outer space activities. Article 9 of the treaty focuses on planetary protection and says that states should avoid harmful contamination of outer space. This is important because it cements planetary protection in law. However, the treaty fails to give a definitive definition of harmful contamination, and also fails to address how states should go about avoiding harmful contamination. To combat this, COSPAR created a planetary protection policy, the first of which was a probabilistic policy. Using this equation, the probability of contamination was determined. The total probability of all missions worldwide must be less than 1 times 10 to the negative third. After 1984, COSPAR exchanged this policy for its current mission category policy. Each mission is classified into one of 5 categories. As the categories increase, the more decontamination and documentation must be done, including special procedures for missions to Mars. Most governmental agencies appear to follow COSPAR's planetary protection policy, including NASA, the European Space Agency, JAXA, and Roscosmos. The game in this section has to do with cleaning Mars rovers. Players use their mouse to try and keep a circle inside a green area in order to clean and heat the rover to kill bacteria. If all tasks are completed within the time limit, players are rewarded, with watching their rover lift off towards Mars. The next section explains why people should be concerned about the current state of planetary protection. I begin by examining non-biological contamination of outer space. For example, the large amount of space junk or debris from spacecraft that remains in orbit around Earth, flying at over 20,000 miles per hour. Astronauts have also left a variety of materials on the surface of the moon, including empty packets of food and 96 bags of human waste. With human feces containing many bacteria that can survive in oxygen-free environments, it's possible that Earth bacteria could have lived on the moon for a time. Utilizing a 360-degree photo, website visitors can explore some of the objects Apollo 16 left on the moon in 1972. The main area of concern in the 21st century, however, is that of commercial spaceflight. Thanks to the Outer Space Treaty, non-governmental organizations must still abide by the treaty's articles, and must also receive a license from the participating state to conduct work in outer space. This includes the ability to launch their own spacecraft. For example, the company SpaceX must receive a license from the United States in order to launch their rockets. However, unlike governmental agencies and the scientific community, which follow COSPAR's planetary protection guidelines, these companies do not appear to follow them. As recently as 2019, the Arc Mission Foundation teamed up with Israeli company SpaceIL to launch a lunar lander to the moon. While descending, the lander crashed, and so did a pod of microscopic animals called tardigrades. These tardigrades were not originally approved by the launching space agency. Arc Mission Foundation founder Nova Spivak stated, "We didn't tell them we were putting life in this thing. Space agencies don't like last-minute changes, so we just decided to take the risk." It is this reason that planetary protection must be updated. We must prevent the emerging commercial sector from possibly contaminating the solar system and killing off alien life before we find it. To finish off this section, users can play a game where they walk across the moon and clean up some objects that we have left behind there, including crashed spacecraft, bags of waste, and even golf balls. The final section discusses my proposed ideas for reforming planetary protection. I begin by explaining the new space race. Rather than between countries as it was in the 1960s, it is between companies. Many companies are looking to harvest resources from asteroids to bring back to Earth. The potential billion-dollar industry even includes some asteroids estimated to be worth over 25 quintillion US dollars. Companies with dreams of these riches, as I mentioned earlier, are not eager to address the international planetary protection guidelines put out by COSPAR. So, what can we do about this? Well, a proposed solution is creating an international treaty, similar to the Outer Space Treaty, which requires COSPAR's planetary protection guidelines to become legally binding, as well as to create a concrete definition of harmful contamination. There are a few issues with this approach, however. The first being that it can take multiple years to negotiate a treaty of this nature, and with the need for over 100 countries that have signed the Outer Space Treaty to sign the new one, the likelihood of this coming to fruition before companies take a hold of outer space is slim. Furthermore, scientific views can change dramatically over time. COSPAR meets to discuss changes to its policy every other year. Having to renegotiate a treaty every other year is difficult to maintain. This is why I propose that laws be set nationally. While I recognize that this will only affect one specific country at a time, I believe it is the fastest way to achieve the goal of reinventing planetary protection. Since commercial companies must obtain a license from their respective government in order to do business in outer space, I propose that laws be put in place to force companies to practice COSPAR's planetary protection guidelines, as well as any supplemental guidelines outlined by that government's space agency if one exists, in order to receive a license. Current companies with licenses must reapply under these conditions to continue utilizing outer space. National laws are generally quicker to pass and update as scientific opinion changes. Since states signed to the Outer Space Treaty have an obligation to avoid harmful contamination, which also leaves them liable for their non-governmental entities as well, laws of this type are necessary to avoid breaking the treaty in the future. Russia already has the beginnings of these types of laws, with Article 4 of the Law of the Russian Federation about space activities prohibiting harmful contamination and making private entities confirm that their missions meet safety standards, including environmental ones, before licensing. I lastly point out how planetary protection and environmental protections can be linked. As environmental issues are currently being discussed on Earth, the future will have both planetary protection and environmental protection combined, especially as humans prepare to have a lasting residence on the Moon and Mars. The concept of planetary protection is expanded beyond traditional microorganism contamination to include pollution of greenhouse gases, space junk, and other environmental hazards. The game on this page highlights the emergence of commercial spaceflight and disregard of planetary protection. The player must watch for rockets leaving Earth and determine if they are contaminated. If contaminated, players can fire a laser to destroy the rocket before it is able to reach another planet. As time goes on, the rate of rocket launches rises and spacecraft move faster. This symbolizes the progression of technology and the eventual dominance of commercial spaceflight over governmental agencies. My hope is that after looking through and interacting with this website, people will have gained new knowledge into the importance of planetary protection and its need for updating as we now enter the new space age. I would like to thank you for listening, and I hope that you learned something today. You can explore my website by typing the URL on the screen or by clicking the link in the description. Thank you.